In late May 2021, the bodies of 215 Indigenous children were found in unmarked graves at the Kamloops Residential School. This tragedy is quite naturally the topic of a lot of conversation and concern across Canada. I just want to add a few of my thoughts on today's episode of Don't Talk TV from my perspective as a criminal defense lawyer. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So on May the 28th, 2021, it was reported that as a result of a survey of the grounds of the Kamloops Indian Residential School with the assistance of radar, discovered 215 unmarked graves of Indigenous children who'd been buried there. As I understand the various news reports, these were children that had never been reported as deceased. People that knew them thought that they had run away from the school and disappeared and were never heard from again. So this is a very serious situation. I don't think you need me as a lawyer to tell you what a horror this is. Even the concept of children being taken away by the government from their families and put into schools to receive indoctrination in a culture foreign to their own. And then for children to die and those deaths to be hidden takes it even to the next level. But I want to look at this from a perspective of criminal law, because in my view, that's what should really be looked into here. In all the news reports I've read, I haven't read anything about police starting an investigation or starting a search for those who are responsible for what occurred here. I've seen a lot of collective guilt being put on Canadians in general. For example, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said in the House of Commons that this is the fault of Canada. In my respectful submission, this isn't the fault of Canada at large. This is the fault of individuals and of institutions. I had nothing to do with residential schools. The Kamloops Residential School was closed in 1978. I was born in 1980. If I were ever in a position to make any decisions about these things, I'd like to think that I would have done what I could to have them shut down. I certainly don't support the concept of residential schools. I don't even support the concept of government schools, period. That's why my wife has homeschooled our children from the very beginning. Again, also in my respectful view, pitting Indigenous people against quote-unquote settlers or colonists is also unhelpful. It perpetuates an us versus them, a tribal mentality when, in my view, we're all Canadians. We should all be Canadians together. We have our own various backgrounds and we should be proud of our cultural heritage, but we should still be bound together by the fact that we're Canadians. So what I think is most important is finding out what exactly happened and holding those responsible to account. World War II ended in 1945, over 75 years ago, but we're still tracking down and bringing to justice people responsible for crimes during that war. Just as one example, I have here a CBC article from February of 2021 about a man named Helmut Oberlander, who is apparently an interpreter for the Nazis. Oberlander is 96 years old, lives in Waterloo, Ontario, and he's been in a legal battle with the federal government since 1995 when the RCMP launched an investigation into his alleged involvement in war crimes during the Second World War. It says that Oberlander came to Canada in 1954 and obtained citizenship in 1960. So 75 years is not too late. Schools like the Kamloops Indian Residential School, as I mentioned, was closed in 1978. That's a lot more recent than 1945. Certainly, an investigation can be conducted, and although some of the individuals responsible may have already gone to their graves, I suspect that some are still alive, and they should be held to account in the criminal courts of law, in my view. Now again, at this stage, we don't know how these children died. Is this a case of outright mass murder, where they were purposely murdered by staff at the school? Is it a situation of neglect? Is it a situation of inhumane living conditions that resulted in sickness and death? These are all things that need to be found out, but there's a number of different charges that could be pursued under the criminal code for various scenarios. So setting aside murder, which I think is something that people know very well, let me look at a couple other sections of the criminal code that might be relevant to this situation. So I have here the Justice Laws website open, and firstly we have Section 215 of the Criminal Code, Duty of Persons to Provide Necessities. So Section 215, Sub 1 indicates that everyone is under a legal duty, A, as a parent, foster parent, guardian, or head of a family to provide necessities of life for a child under the age of 16 years. B, to provide the necessities of life to their spouse or common law partner. And C, to provide necessities of life to a person under his charge if that person, 1, is unable by reason of detention, age, illness, mental disorder, or other cause to withdraw himself from that charge, and 2, is unable to provide himself with the necessities of life. So certainly subsection A could apply. I'm not sure the exact legal particulars of whether the operators of the residential schools were deemed guardians, but if not, subsection C would absolutely apply because these children were essentially detained in these places. Therefore, the people operating the residential schools, every single person working there had a duty to provide the necessities of life. So if any of these 215 children found in this unmarked grave died because of lack of food, lack of proper water, lack of warm clothing, anything like that, a charge under this section would be appropriate. And I know that that carries with it a maximum sentence of 5 years, although that'd be a maximum sentence per child. And I think there could be a strong argument that there would be consecutive sentences if one person were linked to multiple deaths. Other sections that might be considered would be section 218 of the Criminal Code that indicates that anyone who unlawfully abandons or exposes a child who is under the age of 10 years so that its life is or is likely to be endangered or its health is or is likely to be permanently injured is again guilty of an indictable offense punishable by up to 5 years or an offense punishable on summary conviction. There's also criminal negligence causing death under section 219. Everyone is criminally negligent who A, in doing anything, or B, in omitting to do anything that is his duty to do, shows wanton or reckless disregard for the lives or safety of other persons. Offenses under that section carry maximum 4 years in custody. A person convicted of criminal negligence causing death is guilty of a homicide and liable to up to life in prison. Finally, one could consider section 182 of the Criminal Code that indicates that every person is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 5 years, or is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction who A, neglects without lawful excuse to perform any duty that is imposed on him by law, or that he undertakes with reference to the burial of a dead human or human remains, or B, improperly or indecently interferes with or offers any indignity to a human body or human remains, whether buried or not. So this would apply to the fact that these bodies were hidden, they were put in unmarked graves, and that proper procedures were not followed. This would apply even if it was completely accidental, it wasn't due to negligence that these children died, and that they're simply hidden. So there's certainly many possibilities under the criminal law here, and in my view, if there's any evidence pointing to any surviving staff members being involved in any of these sorts of acts, again, depending on what the evidence reveals the cause of death was, in my view, they should be prosecuted. And this is the key step. This is much more important than any inquiries that may offer helpful suggestions, but don't bring those people to justice. In my view, as long as people are not held accountable for doing these sorts of things, we're not moving forward in a positive direction. And I think it would be fair for someone to question, why are people not criminally prosecuted when 215 indigenous children are found dead, but they're prosecuted if, for example, they're driving a transport truck and collide with a bus full of hockey players? They should both be prosecuted. And again, if we can prosecute 96-year-old alleged war criminals from the 1940s, I don't see why it wouldn't be possible to find people who are involved in these schools in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and with some schools even into the 1980s. This video is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact a lawyer. You can call myself or another lawyer. My 1-855 number is listed below along with my website. If there's any topics you'd like to see me cover on this channel, please leave a comment in the comment section below or send me an email. And if you found this video at all helpful or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, or following me on social media.